Hey there, welcome to another Curtis Stage video tutorial. Today's video tutorial is in Photoshop and we're going to be using the patch tool. This helps us fix images. It's really kind of a magical tool. So I have an image on my desktop. It's of this Pompeii pot. So it's called Pompeii.jpg. I'm going to take it and drag it down to the Photoshop icon and let go. It's going to open up Photoshop. I can zoom in a little bit, Command plus. What I want to do is I want to get rid of these staples. So back in the old days of Photoshop, and not too long ago, but a little bit about 10 years ago, to do this would have been difficult. Now Photoshop makes this really easy. So let's look at the patch tool. If we go over to our toolbar on the left-hand side, we can see that there's a set of tools over here, and you'll probably see a Band-Aid with a little circle. That's a spot healing brush. We'll talk about that in another tutorial. You'll see a healing brush. We'll talk about that today. And then there's the patch tool. There's also something called the content aware move tool, and that's also part of it's kind of part 2 of the patch tool. We will talk about that. So let me open up the patch tool. Now, up on our options bar, there's a couple settings. We want to keep it on this first setting right here, which is just a new selection. It's going to feel like we're making a selection of these staples. And over here, I want it to say source. So there's two choices, source and destination. I want it to say source. So you'll see why in a second. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly show you how this works. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the concepts. So I want to make a selection loosely around this area that I want to clean up. So I'm going to kind of draw a free form, and that's all I got with the patch tool. It's kind of free form loosely around here. I don't want to go tight around those staples and meet all the way back up to the start. So it feels like I'm using a lasso tool. Feels like I'm using a selection tool, which I kind of am briefly. Now, here's where the magic happens. I'm still on my background layer. I don't have a new layer. It's all happening on this layer. I'm going to take this and drag it over to the left or the right, but the left would be best because I have a lot of room. When I drag over here, I'm going to let go, and look at that. Photoshop has now cleaned up those staples. Now, it hasn't done a perfect job if you look at it. We'll get there in a second. So I'm going to Command D and deselect. Check that out. Pretty amazing. This is a low resolution image, which means it doesn't have a lot of pixels per square inch. Still looks really good. If we had a high res image with a lot of pixels per square inch, this image would look even better. So there's some dead giveaways that I've done this. These little kind of pock marks here. So what I'm going to do is I want to get rid of those. I'm going to use the patch tool for those too. I'm going to kind of loosely go around, and then I'm going to drag to the left or the right. Why wouldn't I want to go up here? Well, if I go up to the bright part of the pot, you can see that when I do this, it's going to blend the pixels brighter. If I go to the dark part of the pot, it's going to blend the pixels darker. So I want to try to stay on the same horizon line so that the light from the pot is about the same. I want to maybe avoid this orange color. So I could maybe go a little bit higher and let go, and that's pretty good. Command D, deselect, looking pretty good. And then I can kind of go around this one, maybe get rid of that, go over there, maybe go around this one. Those two guys go right here. Notice I'm dragging pretty close to it. And maybe go over here. And there I go. I would have never known that those staples were there. Pretty great. Now, let's talk a little bit about the healing brush tool. It works a little differently, but it does kind of the same thing, except I'm painting with this. Now, what the patch tool is doing is it's doing what's called destructive editing. We'll talk more about that in this class when we meet in person in class, but basically destructive editing is I'm editing pixels on this image. I am not adjusting virtual pixels. I'm actually adjusting the actual pixels of this image. So destructive editing is not something you usually want to do, but this tool is so great that you kind of can't avoid it on here. The drawback of the patch tool is it only really works on the layer that you're on. Unlike a tool that we're going to use in future classes, the clone stamp tool, you can clone, which makes copies of pixels from one image to another and one layer to another. The patch tool only does it within the layer you're on. Now, there's a way around this, and we will do it in class, but essentially you can only patch on the layer that you're on. Now, The healing brush tool works similarly. What it does is it finds pixels. It says, oh, you'd like to fix, like, let's say this line right here. It's going to say, okay, I see that. And where you're selecting, looks like you want to replace pixels, and then it's going to blend the pixels. So it's not making copies of pixels. It's not doing a copy and paste of pixels. It's taking the new pixels and blending them with the area that you've selected. So to use this tool, it's a brush. I can go up here. I can change the size of the brush. I can change the hardness. That means it might have a hard edge or a soft edge. If I go down to 0%, it's a soft edge. If I go up here, it's a hard edge. So I'm going to maybe make this a little softer edge down here. I can also change the angle of the brush. I can make the brush a little skinnier and turn it like this. So when I hover my mouse over, you can kind of see it. It's about the size of this crack here. So now what I want to do is I want to hover my mouse above the area I want to paint or below the area. I'm going to go above, and I'm going to hold down Option and click. And when I do that, it picks up pixels right in this area. So Option, click, picks up pixels. Now it's got those pixels loaded up. Let me just kind of go over here so you can see it. See how they're loaded up on the brush? And then I can paint right over that, and it is following my line. So it's hard to see, but right above this healing brush tool, there's a little plus, and that's where it's pulling the pixels from. So it's like the patch tool, but you're painting. So this is called the healing brush tool. Pretty great. Let me do it with this little guy right here. I'm going to change my brush. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to change the angle of it. I'll keep it thin like this. Well, maybe I'll just spread it out a little bit. Okay. So now I'm going to Option click on my keyboard. So hold down Option, click, then let go of Option. You got to let go of Option, and then I can paint. Look at that. Beautiful. You'd never know. Now, I don't want to just now paint over here with these pixels over on the left-hand side because the light of the pot might be different, right? I don't want to paint over here because it's pulling paint from the left side and putting it over here on the right. It's not going to look good. So you want to kind of pull from areas close to where you need to heal. So like right here, I want to Option click kind of near these two things and then paint there. We'll be using this tool more during the semester. It's really great. So this is the patch and healing brush tool. Now, the content aware move tool works a little bit differently, and we're going to cover that in a second tutorial. All right, so this has been a Curtis Stage tutorial. Thank you for joining me, and we'll talk to you soon.